Daniel woke up before the sun rose, as he always did. The sound of the old alarm clock on the side table rang softly, and he quickly turned it off before it disturbed his daughter, Emily, who was still sleeping in the small bed across the room. Their house was not big. It was just 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen, but to Daniel it was home, and as long as Emily was safe and warm inside it, he was thankful. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, running his hand through his messy hair, already thinking about the long day ahead. Being a single father was not easy, but Daniel never complained. Ever since his wife passed away a few years ago, Emily had become the center of his world. She was only 8 years old, but she had the wisdom of someone much older. She never demanded fancy things, never asked for toys or clothes like other kids. She seemed to understand their struggles in a quiet way, and that gave Daniel even more strength to keep going. He stood up, pulled on his worn work overalls, and went into the kitchen to prepare breakfast. There was only a little bread left, and some jam in a jar that was nearly empty. Daniel spread it carefully, making sure Emily's slice had more than his. When she woke up and rubbed her sleepy eyes, she smiled at him, and that smile made his tired body feel lighter. "Morning, Daddy," she said softly. "Morning, sunshine," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Eat up. You've got school today." Emily ate happily, even though it was just bread and jam. She knew her father worked hard, and she never wanted to make him feel like it wasn't enough. After breakfast, Daniel walked her to the small school in town. On the way, he held her hand and listened as she talked about her homework and her teacher. He nodded, encouraging her, even though his mind was already thinking about the old cars waiting for him at the workshop. The workshop was not fancy either. It was just a little garage by the roadside, with tools that had seen better days and a roof that leaked whenever it rained. But it was Daniel's pride. He had built it up slowly, piece by piece, and it was the only way he could earn enough to pay rent, buy food, and keep Emily in school. The townspeople trusted him because he was honest. Some mechanics charged too much or did careless work, but Daniel always gave his best. He charged fairly, sometimes even less than he should, because he knew most people in the town struggled with money just like him. After dropping Emily at school, he unlocked the garage and looked around at the cars lined up outside. Some belonged to farmers who used their trucks every day, and others were small cars from people who could not afford new ones. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag and got to work. His back ached, and his hands were rough from years of labor, but he never slowed down. Every nail, every bolt, every engine he touched was done with care. By noon, he was covered in grease and sweat, but he didn't stop. He ate nothing more than a sandwich he had packed from home, saving money wherever he could. While tightening a stubborn bolt under a car, he thought about Emily's future. She was bright, always at the top of her class, and Daniel dreamed of sending her to a good school one day. But dreams cost money, and he barely made enough to keep them afloat. Sometimes, when customers delayed payment or parts were too expensive, Daniel worried about how they would manage. Yet, whenever Emily hugged him at night and told him she loved him, he felt rich in a way money could never measure. His love for her was stronger than any hardship. That evening, after picking Emily from school, Daniel let her sit in the corner of the workshop while he finished the last job of the day. She would sit quietly, doing her homework, occasionally asking him a question about math or spelling. He always tried to help, even though he had left school early in his own life. He wanted her to know that her studies mattered. When he finally closed the shop, the sun was already setting, painting the sky in orange and purple. Emily held his hand as they walked back home. They stopped by the small grocery shop where Daniel bought a few vegetables with the little money he had left in his pocket. On the way, Emily asked him, "Daddy, when I grow up, will I be able to buy you a big house?" Daniel smiled, his heart aching a little at her innocent words. "You don't need to worry about that, sunshine. Just study hard and be happy. That's all I want. At home, they cooked a simple meal together. Daniel chopped the vegetables while Emily stirred the pot, pretending to be the chef. They laughed together, filling the small house with warmth. After dinner, Daniel helped her prepare her school bag for the next day, then tucked her into bed. He read her a short story from an old children's book, his voice soft and steady until she drifted to sleep. When the house was finally quiet, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table, his hands folded and his eyes tired. He thought about how much he missed his wife, about how different life might have been if she were still there. But he quickly pushed the thought away. He had Emily, and she was enough. He had to stay strong for her. That night, as he lay down on his own bed, Daniel prayed silently. He prayed not for wealth, not for luxury, but for the strength to keep going, for the health to continue working, and for his daughter to grow up safe and happy. Little did he know that life had something unexpected waiting for him, something that would change his world in a way he could never imagine. And as the moonlight filled the room, shining faintly on Emily's peaceful face, Daniel felt a spark of hope deep inside. Tomorrow would be another hard day, but he would face it with courage, just like every day before. The next morning started like any other for Daniel. He woke up early, made a simple breakfast for Emily, and walked her to school with a smile on his face even though his mind was already weighed down by worries. He had bills piling up, and there were still a few customers who owed him money for past repairs. But Daniel had learned to keep those worries inside. Emily deserved a father who smiled at her every day, not one who burdened her with problems she was too young to carry. When he reached the workshop, Daniel noticed a few cars parked nearby, waiting for his attention. He unlocked the garage door and got ready for the day. The sound of birds mixed with the faint noise of passing vehicles on the dusty road. He tied a rag around his waist, rolled up his sleeves, and went to work, his hands moving quickly and confidently. Cars were his life, and fixing them was the only way he knew to keep food on the table. Hours passed, and the sun grew hotter. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but Daniel stayed focused. Just as he finished tightening a loose part under a small sedan, he heard a loud, uneven sound coming down the road. It was the sound of an engine that was close to giving up. He stood up and wiped his hands, looking toward the direction of the noise. A rusty old farm truck rolled slowly into view, coughing thick smoke. Its front tires looked worn, and the engine rattled like it might stop at any moment. Daniel frowned in concern as the truck came to a shaky halt right in front of his workshop. The door opened, and a young woman stepped out. She wore simple clothes, faded jeans, a checkered shirt, and dusty boots. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, and her face was slightly flushed from the heat. "Hi," she said politely, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "My truck broke down again. Could you take a look at it?" Daniel nodded quickly. "Of course. Pull it a little closer inside if you can. If not, I'll push it." The woman smiled faintly, apologetic. "I don't think it'll move any further. It barely made it here." Daniel chuckled softly. "No problem. I'll handle it." He called out to a young boy passing by to help him push the truck inside. With some effort, they managed to roll it into the garage. Once the truck was in place, Daniel opened the hood and peered inside. The sight wasn't pretty. The engine was in bad shape, wires were loose, and oil stains showed years of neglect. "This truck has seen some rough days," Daniel said, shaking his head gently. "How long has it been giving you trouble?" The woman shrugged. "Honestly, 4 months. I use it every day for farm work, so I just keep pushing it until it gives up completely. I don't have many choices." Daniel understood. He often saw farmers with old trucks like this, vehicles they relied on but could barely afford to repair properly. He didn't judge her. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and started checking the parts one by one. While he worked, the woman looked around the small workshop. She noticed how clean and organized it was, despite the old tools and cracked floor. She also saw a little wooden desk in the corner with a small backpack on it, likely belonging to a child. She wondered if Daniel had a family, but she didn't ask yet. Daniel worked steadily, explaining a little as he went along. Your spark plugs are almost gone. The oil filter is clogged, and this hose here is leaking. It's no wonder the truck's been struggling. The woman nodded, listening carefully. Can you fix it? She asked, her tone hopeful. I'll do my best, Daniel replied with a calm smile. It'll take a few hours, though. You might have to wait. That's fine. I can wait, she said, pulling up a chair by the corner. As Daniel bent over the engine, Emily came walking in from school, carrying her little bag. She ran up to her father and hugged him. Daddy, she said with excitement. Daniel kissed her head. Hey, sunshine. How was school today? It was good. I got a star from teacher, she said proudly, pulling out her notebook to show him. Daniel's eyes softened. That's wonderful. I'm proud of you. He noticed the woman smiling at the scene, and he felt a little shy, but he continued working. The woman leaned forward. Your daughter? She asked kindly. Yes, Daniel answered simply. Emily. She's my whole world. Emily, curious as ever, turned to the woman. Are you waiting for Daddy to fix your truck? The woman chuckled. Yes, I am. It's been giving me a lot of trouble. Emily nodded seriously, as if she understood. Don't worry. My daddy is the best. He can fix anything. Daniel laughed softly, shaking his head. Don't build me up too much, sunshine. But the woman could already see it, the care, the effort, the honesty in his work. He wasn't the type of man to cut corners. Every movement of his hands showed skill and patience. He wasn't just repairing her truck, he was treating it as if it mattered deeply. As the hours passed, Daniel continued to repair the truck. He didn't stop even when sweat dripped into his eyes. He replaced the worn parts with spares he had kept for emergencies. At one point, he sighed, realizing the cost of the replacement parts might be more than the woman could pay. But when he looked at her tired face, he decided to charge her only for the basics. Finally, as the evening sun began to fade, Daniel wiped his hands and turned to her. It's not perfect, but it should run much better now. You'll need a full replacement for some parts eventually, but for now, it'll get the job done. The woman's eyes lit up. Really? Thank you so much. Daniel nodded. I'll only charge you for the parts I used. The labor, don't worry about it. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. But you worked for hours. That's not fair to you. Daniel shrugged gently. I know how hard it is to make ends meet. I don't want to add to your burden. Just pay for the parts, and that's enough. The woman looked at him silently for a moment, clearly touched. Then she glanced at Emily, who was humming softly while drawing on a piece of paper in the corner. She understood something in that instant. This man was not only skilled but also kind-hearted. As she paid him, slipping a little extra into the folded bills without his notice, she thought to herself that she had never met someone like Daniel before. She had met people who wanted favors, people who wanted connections, and people who cared only about money. But here was a man who fixed her truck not because of what he could get from her, but because it was the right thing to do. What Daniel didn't know was that the woman he helped so selflessly was not just a simple farmer. She was Sarah Harrison, the daughter of a wealthy landowner and a millionaire heiress. But for now, she kept her identity quiet. She wanted to see how far kindness and honesty could go without the shadow of money hanging over her. That night, as Daniel closed the shop and walked Emily home, Sarah drove away in her repaired truck, glancing at them through the mirror. Something told her this was not the last time their paths would cross. The next few days passed quietly, but Daniel often found himself thinking about the young woman with the broken farm truck. She had been kind, polite, and patient in a way that stood out from most customers. She had not complained about the wait or the heat, and she had even taken the time to speak warmly with Emily. Something about her had left an impression on him, though he quickly reminded himself that she was just a customer and he had no time for daydreaming. His life was about work, bills, and raising his daughter. That was all. Meanwhile, Sarah Harrison couldn't get Daniel and Emily out of her mind either. She returned to her father's farm, where she worked quietly among the fields, blending in with the other farm hands. Few knew that she was not simply a farmer but the daughter of a wealthy landowner. She chose to keep her identity hidden because she wanted to be seen as an ordinary person, not as someone born into privilege. When she met Daniel, she felt something different. He had looked at her like she was just a woman with a broken truck, not someone important, not someone rich. And his kindness toward his daughter had touched her heart deeply. One afternoon, Sarah decided to drive back into town, her truck running smoother thanks to Daniel's careful work. She parked near his workshop and walked inside, holding a small bag in her hand. Daniel was bent over another vehicle, his shirt damp with sweat and his hands blackened with oil. Emily sat in the corner, humming to herself while coloring on a piece of paper. When Daniel looked up and saw Sarah, he smiled politely. "Truck giving you more trouble?" he asked, setting down his wrench. Sarah shook her head. "No, actually, it's running much better. I just came by to thank you again. You really saved me that day." Daniel shrugged humbly. "It's my job. I'm glad it's working for you." Sarah hesitated, then held out the bag. "I brought something for Emily. It's just some books and crayons. I noticed she likes to draw." Emily's eyes widened with delight as her father took the bag and peeked inside. For a moment, Daniel looked unsure. He didn't like taking gifts from people, especially when he couldn't offer much in return. But when he saw Emily's hopeful face, he softened. "Say thank you, sunshine," he said gently. "Thank you," Emily chirped, hugging Sarah's leg. Sarah bent down and hugged her back, her heart warming at the little girl's innocence. From then on, Sarah began visiting Daniel's workshop more often. Sometimes she brought small things for Emily, sometimes she just sat and talked while Daniel worked. She never acted superior or distant. She asked questions about engines and repairs, listened to Daniel's stories about cars, and even laughed at Emily's silly jokes. Slowly, a friendship grew between them, though Daniel kept a respectful distance. He couldn't forget his place. She was a young woman who seemed hard-working, but he assumed she had her own life and family. He was just a struggling mechanic raising a daughter. One day, while Daniel was fixing her truck again after a minor problem, Sarah sat with Emily under the shade of a tree outside the workshop. Emily spoke openly, as children often do. "My daddy works so hard," Emily said proudly, coloring in one of the books Sarah had given her. "Sometimes he skips dinner so I can eat more. But he never tells me. I just know." Sarah's chest tightened as she listened. "He must love you very much," she said softly. Emily nodded seriously. "He says I'm his sunshine. He smiles because of me. But I know he gets tired. He just doesn't want me to see." Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. She looked at Daniel through the open garage door. He was bent over the truck, focused, determined, unaware of how much his sacrifices showed in Emily's words. Sarah felt a wave of respect and admiration for him. He was not wealthy, not powerful, but his heart was rich in a way money could never buy. Later that evening, when the truck was ready again, Sarah offered to pay Daniel more than the small fee he requested. He refused, as he always did, saying, "I only charge for what I do. Nothing more." But you deserve more, Sarah said firmly. You spent hours working. Daniel shook his head with a small smile. I'm not fixing cars to get rich. I'm fixing them to survive. People like you need their trucks for work. I can't take more than what's fair. Sarah looked at him with quiet admiration, realizing more and more that this man's honesty was something rare. She wanted to tell him who she truly was, to reveal her background and her family's wealth, but something stopped her. She wanted to keep this friendship pure, built on sincerity and trust, not on the weight of her last name or her father's money. As weeks went by, Sarah continued to visit. Sometimes she helped Emily with homework while Daniel worked. Sometimes she shared fresh vegetables from the farm with them. Slowly, she became part of their small world, though Daniel still never allowed himself to think it could be more than friendship. One evening, as they sat outside the workshop, the sky glowing with sunset colors, Sarah asked Daniel a question she had been holding back. Daniel, don't you ever wish for more? A bigger workshop, better tools, a comfortable life. Daniel wiped his hands and leaned back against the wall. He thought for a moment before answering. Of course, I wish for those things. I want Emily to have everything she deserves. But wishes don't fix broken engines, and they don't pay bills. Hard work does. So I focus on what I can do today. Sarah studied him quietly. His words were simple, but they carried a strength she admired. That night, as Sarah drove back to her family's estate, she knew she couldn't keep her secret forever. Daniel had no idea that the woman he treated as an ordinary farmer was actually the daughter of one of the richest men in the region. And soon, that truth would come out, whether she was ready or not. But for now, she chose to keep it hidden, cherishing the honesty and warmth she found in the small garage with the mechanic and his little girl. It was a world far from luxury and wealth, yet it was richer in ways her own life had never been. The day started like any other, with Daniel opening his small garage early in the morning. Emily was sitting at the corner table, drawing little flowers on her notebook while her father worked on an old car. Life had become a little brighter lately. Sarah had been visiting often, and her presence always seemed to lift their spirits. Emily loved her company and treated her like an older sister, while Daniel quietly respected her kindness. But on this particular afternoon, something unusual happened. A shiny black luxury car pulled up outside the garage, so different from the usual farm trucks and worn-out vehicles Daniel normally worked on. The car door opened, and a tall, older man stepped out. His suit was sharp, his shoes polished, and his presence immediately drew attention. People walking on the street slowed down to see who it was. Daniel wiped his hands nervously on a rag, unsure of why such a wealthy-looking man would stop at his little workshop. Emily peeked out curiously, holding onto her father's arm. The man looked around, then turned his gaze toward the garage. Moments later, Sarah stepped out from the passenger side of the car. Daniel blinked in surprise. Sarah, he said, confused. Is everything okay? Sarah smiled gently, though she looked slightly nervous. Yes, everything's fine. I wanted to introduce you to someone. She turned to the man beside her. This is my father, Mr. Harrison. The moment she said the name, Daniel froze. He had heard that name many times before. Mr. Harrison was one of the most powerful and wealthy businessmen in the region. Everyone knew of him, but very few had actually met him. Daniel's eyes widened as he realized the truth. He looked at Sarah, then back at her father. Your father, he asked slowly, trying to make sense of it. Sarah nodded softly. Yes. I never told you before, because I wanted you to know me as myself, not as who my family is. Daniel felt his throat tighten. His heart pounded in his chest as embarrassment washed over him. All those days he had treated her like an ordinary farmer, never knowing she was the daughter of one of the richest men in the country. He looked down at his hands, covered in grease and oil, and suddenly felt out of place. I I didn't know, he stammered. I'm sorry if I ever. Sarah quickly stepped forward, shaking her head. Please don't apologize. You treated me with respect, and you helped me without expecting anything in return. That's why I admire you, Daniel. Her father, Mr. Harrison, observed silently for a while before speaking. His voice was deep, steady, and commanding. My daughter has told me about you. About your honesty, your hard work, and how you treat people. I wanted to meet the man she speaks so highly of. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to attention from wealthy people. He felt small in comparison, standing there in his greasy overalls, while Mr. Harrison stood tall and confident in his expensive suit. Emily, innocent as always, broke the silence. She walked up to Sarah and tugged at her hand. You didn't tell us your daddy was famous, she said with wide eyes. Sarah laughed softly, kneeling to Emily's level. I know, sweetheart. I wanted to keep it a secret for a while. Mr. Harrison's stern expression softened when he looked at Emily. You must be Emily, he said kindly. Your father talks about you with so much love. He must be very proud of you. Emily blushed and hid her face behind her father's leg. Daniel gave a small smile, though his nerves still held him tightly. The townspeople had started to gather outside, whispering among themselves. A few pointed at the luxury car, shocked to see someone like Mr. Harrison in their small neighborhood. For them, it was a sight they would not forget. Daniel wished the ground would swallow him up. He felt exposed, like everyone could see how different his world was from Sarah's. He thought about the times she had sat in his garage, chatting with Emily, eating simple snacks, laughing at little jokes. He never realized she came from a life of luxury. Mr. Harrison stepped closer, studying Daniel. You are a man who could have easily charged my daughter more. You could have taken advantage of her when she came here desperate with a broken truck. But you didn't. You treated her fairly, with honesty and kindness. That is rare. Daniel lowered his gaze. I only did what was right. I don't like to cheat anyone, no matter who they are. Mr. Harrison nodded slowly, as if confirming what his daughter had already told him. That is exactly why I am here. Men like you are worth knowing. The words surprised Daniel. He didn't expect praise from a man like Mr. Harrison. Still, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he didn't belong in their world. After a few more minutes of conversation, Sarah and her father prepared to leave. Before getting into the car, Mr. Harrison turned back to Daniel. We'll meet again. I believe this is only the beginning. As the car drove away, Daniel stood in silence, still trying to process what had just happened. Emily tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, does this mean Sarah is really rich? Daniel sighed softly, kneeling to her level. Yes, sunshine. She comes from a very wealthy family. Emily tilted her head. But she's still nice. She's still Sarah. Her simple words struck Daniel deeply. Emily didn't care about money, titles, or power. She only saw the kindness in people. And maybe that was the lesson he needed to hold on to. That night, Daniel found it hard to sleep. He kept thinking about Sarah and her father. Part of him felt embarrassed, like he could never measure up to someone from her world. But another part of him remembered her smile, her warmth, and the way she treated Emily like family. Perhaps money didn't define everything after all. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in her father's car, gazing out the window. She worried about how Daniel must have felt seeing the truth. She hadn't meant to deceive him, but she knew her secret would change the way he looked at her. Her father, however, had been impressed. That gave her hope. The days after Sarah's true identity was revealed were different for Daniel. He still worked hard at the small garage, fixing cars and trucks, but his mind often wandered. Whenever he looked at his hands covered in grease or at the cracked floor of his workshop, he wondered if Sarah thought less of him now. He didn't want Emily to notice his worries, so he kept smiling, but inside he felt uneasy. Emily, on the other hand, spoke about Sarah all the time. "Daddy, do you think Sarah will visit today?" she would ask almost every afternoon. Her little heart had grown attached to the woman who not only brought her books and crayons but also listened to her stories with care. Daniel would smile and say, "Maybe, sunshine. We'll see." And indeed, Sarah did visit. She arrived not in the big luxury car with her father, but in her same old farm truck. She wanted Daniel to know that, despite the truth about her family, she was still the same person he had met that day when her truck broke down. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in soft gold, Sarah stepped into the workshop carrying a basket. She placed it on the table near Emily, who quickly peeked inside and gasped with delight at the fresh fruits and homemade bread. Sarah smiled. "I thought you two could use something sweet today." Daniel, though grateful, still felt cautious. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly. "I wanted to," Sarah replied. "Daniel, I hope you don't see me differently now. I'm still Sarah. My family's wealth doesn't change who I am." Daniel sighed and looked at her. "It's not you I see differently. It's me. I don't belong in your world, Sarah. I'm just a poor mechanic raising a little girl. You come from a place of luxury. People like me don't usually end up around people like you." Sarah shook her head gently. "That's not true. My father may have money, but I've met so many people in his world who care only about themselves. What I saw in you is different. You're honest, hardworking, and you love your daughter more than anything. That means more to me than money ever could." Her words touched Daniel deeply, but he still stayed quiet. He didn't want to dream of things that might not be possible. A week later, something unexpected happened. Mr. Harrison himself returned to the garage. This time he didn't come in a luxury car but in a simple pickup truck, surprising everyone in town again. He asked to speak with Daniel privately. "I've been thinking," Mr. Harrison began, his voice steady. "Men like you are rare. You have skills, but more importantly, you have values. My daughter has told me much about you. I'd like to offer you something, a chance to expand this workshop. I can help you get better tools, more space, maybe even hire extra hands. You don't have to keep struggling like this." Daniel was stunned. His first instinct was to refuse. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I can't take charity. I've managed this long on my own. I don't want to be someone's burden." Mr. Harrison's lips curved into the faintest smile. "This isn't charity, Daniel. It's an investment. I believe in helping good men grow. And I believe you have more to give than just fixing cars in this small shop." Daniel hesitated, but when he thought of Emily, her schooling, her future, he realized this might be the chance he had always prayed for. With humility, he finally nodded. "If it's truly an investment, and not pity, then I accept. But I'll work hard to prove I deserve it." Mr. Harrison extended his hand, and Daniel shook it, his heart racing with both relief and disbelief. From that day forward, changes began slowly. New tools arrived, the leaking roof was fixed, and Daniel was able to take on more work. His workshop grew busier, and he even hired a young assistant to help. People in town admired him even more, not only for his skill but for his humility. Sarah continued to visit often. She helped Emily with her homework, brought fresh produce, and even learned a little about fixing engines. The bond between them grew stronger each day, though Daniel never said aloud what he felt inside. He respected her too much to assume she might feel the same way. One evening, as Emily ran outside chasing fireflies, Sarah sat beside Daniel on the bench outside the garage. The air was cool, and the stars had begun to appear. Do you know what I admire most about you, Daniel? Sarah asked softly. Daniel shook his head. What's that? You never let hardship steal your kindness. Even when you had so little, you gave so much. That's rare. Daniel looked down at his hands, then back at her. Sometimes kindness is all we can afford to give. Sarah smiled, her eyes shining in the starlight. And sometimes, it's worth more than all the riches in the world. At that moment, Daniel realized something. Maybe he didn't have to see their worlds as separate. Maybe kindness, honesty, and love were bridges stronger than wealth or status. As months passed, the little garage transformed into a thriving workshop. Emily grew happier, knowing her father was no longer struggling as much. She often sat by Sarah's side, chattering about school and dreams for the future. And slowly, Daniel allowed himself to dream too, not of riches, but of a life where he and his daughter were no longer alone. One Sunday afternoon, Sarah arrived with her father once again. This time, Mr. Harrison looked at Daniel with warmth in his eyes. You've proven yourself, son. You've built something good here. And more than that, you've given my daughter a kind of friendship she's never found anywhere else. I'm proud to know you. Daniel, humbled, bowed his head. Thank you, sir. I've only done what I know best: work hard and stay honest. Mr. Harrison patted his shoulder. And that, Daniel, is exactly what makes you worthy of more. Emily, overhearing, clapped her hands with joy. Daddy, see. I told you you're the best. Daniel laughed and hugged her tight. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. That night, after everyone had left, Daniel sat on the porch with Emily asleep in his arms. He looked at the stars and thought about how life had changed. He had started with nothing but an old workshop and the love for his daughter. And now, through honesty, kindness, and unexpected friendship, doors had opened he never imagined. He whispered softly, as if to his late wife, "We're going to be okay now. Emily's going to have the life she deserves." And deep inside, Daniel knew this was not just the end of a hard journey, but the beginning of a new chapter filled with hope, dignity, and love.